The video call connected at exactly 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday evening. As soon as the screen turned on, I saw my mother's face. She looked serious. I knew that it looked very good. It was the look she made whenever she had already decided something and expected everyone else to agree with her. "We need to talk about Thanksgiving," she said immediately. She didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't ask about Catherine. She just got straight to the point. I was sitting in my home office after work. I had already taken off my blazer, but I was still wearing my work clothes. Behind me, my 7-year-old daughter, Catherine, sat at the kitchen table doing her homework. "Okay," I said. "What's the plan this year?" "Your father and I are hosting Thanksgiving at our house like always," Mom replied. 25 guests have already been confirmed." Then she adjusted her glasses and leaned a little closer to the camera. "But this year is special. Some very important people are coming. The Henderson family will be there. Richard Henderson from Henderson Capital. And the Montgomery family is coming too." She smiled proudly. "Charlotte Montgomery sits on the boards of several huge companies." "That sounds nice," I said politely. But I already had a feeling I knew where this conversation was going. Mom nodded. "Because of these guests, everything must be perfect. The dinner must be elegant and sophisticated." I frowned. "I'm not sure what you mean." She sighed dramatically. "What I mean is this: leave your daughter at home." For a moment, I thought I had heard her wrong. "What? Leave Catherine at home?" Mom repeated. "These are wealthy and important people. We can't have a child running around making noise while adults are discussing business." I stared at the screen. "You want me to leave Catherine behind on Thanksgiving?" "Of course," Mom said. "Get a babysitter. Ask a friend. Do whatever you need to do." She waved her hand like it was the simplest thing in the world. "This dinner is important. It is for networking. Your brother could make valuable business connections." Just then, my brother Andrew stepped into view behind her. "It's really for the best, sis," he said. "These are serious people." My father nodded in agreement from the background. Mom continued. "Your sister Claire already arranged childcare for her boys. She understands how important this dinner is." I slowly turned my head and looked at Catherine. She was quietly working on a math problem. She wasn't making noise. She wasn't causing trouble. She was simply being a normal 7-year-old child. And now her own grandmother didn't want her at Thanksgiving. A sad feeling settled inside my chest. But I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said one word. "Okay." Mom blinked. Clearly, she had expected a fight. "Oh," she said. "Good. I'm glad you're being reasonable. Dinner starts at 3 o'clock sharp. Dress nicely. And try to join the conversations." "I'll do my best." "Wonderful," she said happily. "This is going to be the most elegant Thanksgiving we've ever had." The call ended. I sat quietly for several seconds. Then I got up and walked into the kitchen. Catherine looked up. "Was that Grandma?" "Yes." "Are we going to Grandma's house for Thanksgiving?" I smiled gently. "How would you feel about having our own Thanksgiving this year?" Her eyes immediately brightened. "Our own Thanksgiving? Just you and me?" "Really? Really?" She grinned. "Can we have pizza instead of turkey?" "Absolutely." "And watch movies all day?" "Every movie you want." Catherine jumped out of her chair and wrapped her arms around me. "That sounds way better than Grandma's dinner." I laughed. "Then that's exactly what we'll do." The next 3 weeks passed normally. Every day my mother sent messages about Thanksgiving. She talked about flower arrangements. She talked about decorations. She talked about imported wine. She talked about the 12-course meal she was planning. She seemed completely focused on making everything look impressive. Andrew called twice. Both times he thanked me for being understanding about leaving Catherine behind. Then he spent 20 minutes practicing speeches about cryptocurrency and investments. He wanted to impress the important guests. Claire sent me a text message. "Mom's idea, not mine. Hope you know that." I replied politely. I stayed friendly. I never told anyone what I was really thinking. At the same time, something very important was happening in my own life. For 6 months, my company's communications team had been preparing a major announcement. Every detail had been carefully planned. The announcement would happen the day before Thanksgiving. My communications director, Michael, thought we should wait until January. "The markets are going to react strongly," he warned. "That's okay," I replied. "Let them react." Finally, Wednesday arrived. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, the announcement was released. Within 30 minutes, people were talking about it everywhere online. By 10 o'clock, major television channels were discussing it. I was sitting in my office when Michael called. His voice sounded excited. "You are not going to believe this." "What happened?" "Forbes just moved you up to number 47 on their billionaire list." I nodded. "That makes sense." The stock price jumped immediately. "Your personal wealth increased by another $800 million. "Good." Michael laughed. "The Wall Street Journal wants an interview. Bloomberg wants an interview. CNBC wants an interview. Schedule them for next week. Your phone is about to explode." He wasn't wrong. Messages started arriving nonstop. Old classmates contacted me. Former coworkers reached out. Business partners called. Investors who had once rejected my company suddenly wanted to reconnect. My phone buzzed every few seconds. But one thing stood out. Nobody from my family had contacted me yet. At 11 o'clock, my assistant knocked on my office door. Your mother has called 4 times. I'm busy. That's what I told her. And she says it's urgent. I smiled. Everything is urgent to my mother. By lunchtime, the story had become much bigger. News articles began talking about my life. Reporters loved the story. A single mother had quietly built a technology company while raising her daughter alone. For years nobody knew who owned the company. Now everyone knows. And people were fascinated. Soon my phone showed 63 missed calls from family members. Text messages started arriving one after another. Andrew texted, "Is this real? Call me immediately." Claire wrote, "Mom is freaking out." Dad wrote, "We need to discuss this." Mom called again and again. 17 times. No messages. Just calls. I silenced my phone. After school, I picked up Catherine. Instead of thinking about the news, I took her to her favorite ice cream shop. She ordered a giant chocolate cone. I ordered strawberries. Then we walked through the park together. She told me all about a friend's new puppy. She talked about school. She talked about books. She talked about everything except money. And honestly, that was exactly what I needed. "Mom," she asked suddenly. "Yes. Can we help animals during Thanksgiving break?" "You mean volunteer?" She nodded excitedly. "Absolutely." Her smile stretched from ear to ear. "You're the best mom ever." There was chocolate ice cream on her nose. I laughed and wiped it away. That evening, we made dinner together. Then we watched a documentary about penguins. Catherine loved every minute of it. Afterward, I tucked her into bed. I read 3 chapters of her favorite book. Soon she was asleep. Only then did I finally check my phone. The numbers were unbelievable. 91 missed calls. 147 text messages. 32 voicemails. There were also social media messages. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Apparently my family was determined to reach me somehow. I listened to only one voicemail. It was from my mother. She sounded furious. "I don't know what game you're playing, but this is humiliating. Everyone keeps calling me. People are asking questions. Richard Henderson sent me an article asking if I was proud. How was I supposed to answer? I didn't even know. Call me back immediately. We need to handle this before Thanksgiving." I stared at the phone for a moment. Then I deleted the message. After that, I went to bed. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and bright. For the first time in years, there was no schedule. No rushing. No stress. No fancy clothes. No long drive to my parents' house. Catherine and I slept until 9 o'clock. Then we made pancakes together. We added chocolate chips and strawberries. The kitchen smelled wonderful. Catherine giggled every time a pancake came out in a funny shape. After breakfast, we carried our plates to the living room. The Thanksgiving parade was on television. Huge colorful floats floated through the streets. Marching bands played music. Cartoon characters towered above the crowds. Catherine curled up beside me under a warm blanket. For a while, neither of us spoke. We simply enjoyed being together. My phone sat on the coffee table. Every few minutes it buzzed. More calls. More messages. More people want something. But I ignored every single one. Because at that moment, I wasn't thinking about billion-dollar companies. I wasn't thinking about business deals. I wasn't thinking about important guests or fancy dinners. I was thinking about the little girl sitting beside me. The same little girl my family thought didn't belong at Thanksgiving. Catherine looked up at me and smiled. "This is the best Thanksgiving ever." I smiled back. And for the first time in a very long time, I completely agreed. At 10 o'clock in the morning, my doorbell rang. I looked at the security camera and saw my mom, my dad, Andrew, and Claire standing on my front porch. They were all crowded together. Mom was holding a beautiful bunch of flowers. Dad was carrying a bottle of wine. They all looked nervous. I opened the door a little bit, but I kept the safety chain on. "And quote, can I help you?" And quote, I asked. "And quote, sweetheart," and quote, Mom said in a very sweet voice. I had never heard her talk like that before. "And quote, we came to say we and Oppos re sorry. We also wanted to ask if you and Catherine would like to come to Thanksgiving dinner after all. We would love to have both of you there." And quote, I looked at her carefully. "And quote, I thought rich people were coming," I said. "Wooden and Oppos, Catherine ruined the fancy party?" And quote, Mom and Oppos' smile almost disappeared. And quote, "I may have been wrong about that," and quote, she said quickly. And quote, "Of course we want our granddaughter there. Thanksgiving is for family." And quote, I crossed my arms. And quote, "What about the Henderson family and the Montgomery family?" And quote, I asked. And quote, "One and Oppos, they be upset if a little girl is running around?" And quote, Andrew spoke up. And quote, "Actually, Richard Henderson called this morning. He asked if you were coming to dinner. He said he has been trying to meet with you for months. end quote, Claire quickly added. And Charlotte Montgomery sent Mom a message. She said she was excited to meet you. She even talked about giving you a special position on a company board. End quote. I looked carefully at my mother. I could see how worried she was. Her hands were shaking a little, and the flowers trembled as she held them. End quote. The thing is, I said calmly, end quote, Catherine and I already have plans, end quote, plans, end quote, Mom asked. End quote, yes. We and Oppos, we going to eat pizza and watch movies. Tomorrow we and Oppos, we going to help at the animal shelter. It and Oppos, es going to be a special mother and daughter day. End quote, but the dinner, end quote, Mom started. End quote, the dinner, end quote, I interrupted. End quote, you mean the dinner where Catherine was not invited because you thought she wasn't and Oppos? Tea important enough? End quote. Nobody said anything. Everything became very quiet. Then I spoke again. End quote, do you know something interesting? End quote, I said. Everyone looked at me. End quote, you have known me for 34 years. You raised me. But somehow none of you noticed what I was building. End quote, Dad looked confused. End quote, what do you mean? End quote, you never asked about my work, end quote, I said. End quote, you only wanted to know if I made enough money. You never wondered why I traveled so much. You never asked why I spent so much time working on my laptop or taking phone calls. End quote, Dad shook his head. End quote, you never told us, end quote, I sighed. End quote, you never asked, end quote, then I looked at all of them. End quote, but that and Oppos, it's not even the biggest problem, end quote. I bent down a little so I could look directly at my mother. End quote. The biggest problem is that you looked at your own granddaughter and decided she wasn't and Oppos. Tea good enough to come to your celebration, end quote, Mom looked down. Not because she did something wrong, end quote, I continued. End quote, not because she was mean. Not because she caused trouble. Just because she is 7 years old and you thought she might be inconvenient. End quote, Mom and Oppos, eyes filled with tears. End quote, we made a mistake, end quote, she whispered. End quote, yes, end quote, I said. End quote, you did, end quote, she started crying. End quote, and now you and Oppos, here because I suddenly became useful to you. End quote, Mom looked hurt. Dad frowned. Andrew and Claire stayed quiet. That and Oppos, it's not true, end quote, Andrew said softly. End quote, yes it is, I replied. You and Oppos, here because Richard Henderson wants to meet me. You and Oppos, here because having a billionaire daughter sounds impressive. You and Oppos, here because it makes you look good in front of your rich friends. End quote. Nobody answered because they knew it was true. I continued. End quote, if the news about me hadn't and Oppos, come out yesterday, none of you would be standing here. You would all be getting ready for your fancy Thanksgiving dinner. Catherine would still be left out. She would be sitting at home with a babysitter. And none of you would feel bad about it. End quote. Claire and Oppos' eyes became watery. End quote. We and Oppos sorry, end quote, she said. End quote. We really are, end quote, I nodded slowly. End quote. I believe you and Oppos sorry, end quote. Hope appeared on her face. Then I finished my sentence. End quote. I believe you and Oppos sorry because you and Oppos embarrassed, end quote. The hope disappeared. End quote. I believe you and Oppos sorry because people found out what happened. But I don't undersquo. Believe you and Oppos sorry for hurting Catherine, end quote. Nobody knew what to say. Finally Mom spoke. End quote. So you and Oppos not coming, end quote. Her voice cracked. End quote. No, end quote, I said. End quote. We and Oppos not coming. Not this year, end quote. I took a deep breath. End quote. Not until you understand something very important. Catherine is worth more than 1,000 important business people. And I and Oppos am still your daughter whether I and Oppos am rich or poor. End quote. The porch became silent again. I slowly started closing the door. Then I remembered something. End quote. Oh, and Mom, end quote, she looked up. End quote. Richard Henderson is one of my investors, end quote. Everyone stared at me. End quote. He owns part of my company. So when he asks where I am tonight, you can tell him exactly what happened. You can tell him that you said my daughter wasn't and Oppos. Fancy enough for your Thanksgiving dinner. End quote. Then I closed the door and locked it. Through the window, I watched them stand there for a while. Mom cried quietly. Dad put his arm around her shoulders. Andrew and Claire looked completely surprised. After a few minutes, they walked back to their car and drove away. A little later, Catherine came into the hallway. She was still wearing her pajamas. End quote. Who was at the door? End quote, she asked. I smiled. End quote. Nobody important, sweetheart. End quote. Then I asked, end quote, are you ready for pizza? End quote. Her eyes lit up with excitement. End quote. Can we get the pizza with 4 different cheeses? End quote, I laughed. End quote. We can get whatever pizza you want. And quote, that evening was wonderful. We ate delicious pizza. We watched movies together. We made giant ice cream sundaes. We laughed and smiled all night. Eventually Catherine fell asleep on the couch. Her head rested gently on my lap. The house felt warm and peaceful. After she fell asleep, I opened my laptop. The news about my company had spread all day. The company and Oppo's value had gone up again. I had received several requests for interviews. Many important people wanted to talk to me. As I checked my emails, I noticed one from Richard Henderson. I opened it. It said, end quote, I heard you skipped your family and Oppo's Thanksgiving dinner. End quote. Then it said, end quote, after hearing what happened, I don't and Oppo's blame you. End quote. I kept reading. End quote. My grandchildren and I are eating pizza and watching movies too. End quote. That made me smile. Then he wrote, end quote, fancy dinner parties are not as important as people think. End quote. At the end he added, end quote, call me next week if you want to have coffee and talk about that board position Charlotte mentioned. Happy Thanksgiving. End quote. I smiled and closed my laptop. Outside, snow had started falling from the sky. It was the first snow of the season. Everything looked beautiful and peaceful. Catherine moved a little in her sleep, and I gently pulled her blanket up so she would stay warm. Then my phone buzzed one more time. It was a text message from Claire. It said, end quote, for what it and Oppo's worth, I think you and Oppo's an amazing mom. I and Oppo's, I'm sorry we made you feel like you had to choose, end quote. I read the message for a moment. Then I typed back, end quote, I never had to choose. The choice was always obvious, end quote. After sending the message, I turned off my phone. I sat quietly and watched the snow fall outside. Beside me, Catherine slept peacefully. Pizza boxes were scattered around the room. The television still showed the movie credits. The whole house felt happy and cozy. I thought about tomorrow. We would go to the animal shelter. Maybe we would help take care of some dogs. Maybe we would even decide to foster one. Maybe we would start a brand new family tradition. A tradition where everyone is welcome. A tradition where nobody is left out because of their age. A tradition where nobody is judged by how much money they have. A tradition where people matter more than status, wealth, or important connections. As I looked at my sleeping daughter, I knew something important. Some people measure success by money. Some people measure success by business deals. Some people measure success by how famous they become. But I measured success differently. I measured it in chocolate chip pancakes. I measured it on movie nights. I measured it in pizza dinners and ice cream sundaes. I measured it by the feeling of my daughter and Oppo's head resting safely on my lap while snow fell outside the window. And by that measure, I was the richest person I knew.
अंधेरी दीवारों में खुद को ढूंढता हूँ मैं ये जो दिन सहाने थे उन्हीं को सोचता हूँ मैं तुम्हारे बिन ये मौसम भी बड़ा बेसर्द लगता है दिल का हर एक कोना अब बहुत ही दूर भरता है अंधेरी दीवारों में खुद को ढूंढता हूँ मैं ये जो दिन सुहाने थे उन्हीं को सोचता हूँ मैं तुम्हारे बिन ये मौसम भी बड़ा सर्द लगता है दिल का हर एक कोना बहुत ही दर्द भरता है मेरे साए भी मुझसे अब जुदा होने को कहते हैं तुझे खोने की राहों में ये आंसू बहने लगते हैं कहाँ जाऊं कहाँ ढूंढूं मेरा वो साजो सामा तो मेरी हर एक तमन्ना तू मेरी रूह का मका तू लकीरों में नहीं लिखा जो तुमने ख्वाब देखा था वफा की इस कहानी में फकत एक गम ही लिखा था सितारों से भी पूछता है पता तेरा कहाँ खामोश है दुनिया, कहाँ मेरा जहाँ होगा। बस एक बार मुड़ के देख ले मेरी बेबसी की सूरत। मुझे है आज भी तेरी वफा की सख्त जरूरत। साए मेरे तन्हा सफर बस रह गया दर्द का असर। साए मेरे तन्हा सफर बस रह गया दर्द का असर, दर्द का असर।